The internet has changed the way we live. It has changed the way we work, the way we shop, and even the way we date. It has also changed the way we kill.
I'm Donal McIntyre, and I'm on a quest to explore the dark side of our online world, where one click can lead to murder.
The internet and social media has been a godsend to online predators. Why? Because of the speed in which they can, one, create fake profiles, but two, access victims.
I'll be investigating some of the most disturbing crimes in recent history, where the internet and social media have been used to trick, torture and kill innocent victims lured into a virtual world where nothing is as it seems.
Clearly, she did not realise the person she was talking to online was the man who was going to kill her.
In this programme, when Nadina Burris from Cardiff hooked up with American Sami Al-Mari on an internet dating site, it seemed like a dream come true. He flew from the US to meet her and they fell head over heels in love. But this long-distance romance was to end in murder.
No, please, no!
I want to find out why Al-Mari became a cold-hearted and calculating killer. Was he a ticking time bomb, always primed to explode into murderous violence? Or did he succumb to a crime of passion, unable to control his jealous urge to manage the woman he desired? Over the last decade, the world of dating has been completely transformed. Now, 1 in 5 relationships in the UK start online, and every day, 9 million Britons log on looking for love. And that's exactly what Nadina Burris did in 2012.
26-year-old Nadina Burris met 42-year-old Sami Al-Mari through an internet dating site. Despite their large age gap, Al-Mari gave every impression to Nadine that he was her ideal man. However, their online romance soon turned to tragedy when Al-Mari's true colours were revealed. He terrorised Nadine online, allegedly assaulted her, imprisoned her, spied on her, blackmailed her, and when he knew he couldn't have her, brutally murdered her in a frenzied attack.
I've come to Cardiff, where Nadine took her first steps into the world of online dating. This is where she lived, and this is where she was murdered. I want to discover what happens when you meet the man of your dreams, only to discover he's become your worst nightmare.
Nadina Burris was a proud Muslim from a close-knit family. She was kind and positive and wanted to help everyone around her.
I was so desperately wanting a girl, because obviously I think it's a mum's dream to have a daughter in her image. She was better than any image I could ever wished for. We kept a complete, constant connection, communication going together, and she would always make sure that we were all right.
Even when she was down, she was happy, I mean, I remember once she told me before, she said, everything negative becomes a positive. It's almost like a silver lining in a cloud,
Nadine was single and looking for love, so she joined the internet dating site Muslim Match, and it aimed to bring together Muslims from around the world, and it seemed an ideal fit for Nadine.
I was the one who initiated this suggestion, and then in fact I actually set up in her name. She had a very successful feedback from many users.
But of the many suitors Nadine attracted on Muslim Match in 2012, none grabbed her attention until she met a 42-year-old American called Sami Al-Mari. Al-Mari lived in New York. He claimed he was a millionaire and that he was an FBI agent. Nadine was intrigued.
Al-Mari, he was different. He had this sort of enigma about him. He was like he was saying, you want to know more about me. Trust me, I'm interesting. Nadine she was so attracted towards the idea of finding more about that person, and he was so vague, I think, in his profile. He initiated the conversation as though they were just going to be friends. A lot of the other guys, they assumed that they were going to have a relationship with Nadine, but with this guy, he held back a little bit and he was very clever. He had the ideal sort of personality that you would look for in a guy, someone who's committed, loyal, truthful and sensible.
Nadine and Al-Mari's relationship flourished as they got to know each other online.
At the beginning, it was just the Muslim dating website, had a chat implemented into the website, progressed into sort of text messages, WhatsApp.
The more they communicated, the more Al-Mari seemed to be the dream package.
He was telling everyone that he's rich and he owns these houses in America and he owns another house somewhere in Tanzania. He mentioned about driving luxurious sports cars and owning a car dealership in New York.
Very often, people who need to have control in the beginning of the relationship will do things they know will please that other person. And for that reason, they can appear like Prince Charming. And he would have been taking cues from her and offering her the things he thought that any woman would want.
Al-Mari worked hard over many months to convince Nadine that he was a perfect partner, painting a picture of a wealthy, loving and caring man. But none of his claims were ever substantiated.
Al-Mari, without doubt, is a predator and was using social media because it automatically puts you in touch with vulnerable victims.
Those who are perhaps on the psychopathic spectrum, they're manipulative communicators. They learn what to do to get the response that they want, which makes them incredibly adept on social media.
Al-Mari, without doubt, was able to identify Nadine as an individual that was soft. Not so much weak, but was willing to listen to him. Once he realizes she is the sort of person who is caring, who wants to help victims, if he then portrays himself as a victim, then that will bring her closer to him.
Al-Mari deliberately preyed on Nadine's kind and caring nature. He confided in her that he was an alcoholic, using his addiction as a means of gaining her sympathy and affection.
He'd say, oh, well, I've gone to Alcoholics Anonymous because of you, and I'm starting to stop drinking because of you. She said, Mahi, I can't pursue a relationship with somebody who has this addiction, and if our relationship does progress, I don't want this to be a part of our life. And he said, for you, Nadine, I'll do anything.
Al-Mari presented himself as Nadine's ideal partner, charming, sophisticated, and someone she could save. But what Nadine didn't realise was that she was being slowly and carefully manipulated.
Grooming isn't just about grooming a child. Grooming is a process. And when we look at how Al-Mari acted and groomed Nadine, she was a victim from the first time that they spoke to each other on MuslimMatch.com.
Initially, Nadine and Al-Mari conducted their relationship almost exclusively online, by Skype, email, phone and text message. Understandably, though, they were keen to meet face-to-face. And in 2013, Al-Mari flew in from New York to meet Nadine for the very first time. It was to be the first of 3 visits that year.
Nadine was excited to meet her perfect man in person, and she was eager to introduce him to her family and show him off. But her mom and brother saw a very different individual to the man Nadine had described.
She said, "We're going for coffee, would you like to meet him?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely, of course I would." I met him and I felt surprised, shocked, and he was very kind of distant. Very difficult moment I felt between both of us. There was something not quite right, and I thought, okay.
He looked very shady, very dodgy. You could tell because he always wore sunglasses as well. And I think when you wear sunglasses, even in like a cloudy day, it's pretty much like an impression that you're a dodgy person.
They'd done a lot of communicating online, so she'd built up a picture of who she thought that he was, and that would have been quite embedded. And when he turned up and he was a little bit different to that, she had that background to kind of back up her view of him. Other people who didn't know him so well were probably more alarmed by the differences.
There was something about his aura that was just very off-putting. It was not attractive at all, but Nadine, being the way she was, she didn't judge and she just resumed the conversation.
Almari returned to America, and despite her family's reservations, Nadine had no doubts about him. During his trip to Cardiff, Almari had won over Nadine in person. He was creeping his way into her life, and the pair continued their transatlantic relationship. In 2012, 26-year-old Nadina Burris hooked up with American Sami Almari on an internet dating site. She thought her dreams had come true as they continued their online romance over many months. But in contrast to his carefully constructed online persona, Almari had a sinister side that would ultimately lead to murder. I've come to Cardiff to investigate this tragic case.
In the year after they started dating online, Nadine and Almari's long-distance relationship appeared to flourish. They discussed getting married and spending the rest of their lives together.
He continued to be very charming on the phone, very charming on Skype, and he made sure that she could see his house, and he had a dog as well, and he made sure that she could see that he was having a life of friends, of family, of a house, of security, of stability. And I think Nadine craved that, she needed that in her life. So yeah, it was definitely going to be a marriage.
Almari gave Nadine the impression he was really besotted with her. He bought her gifts and even gave her money, which she used to buy a car. But long-distance relationships are notoriously difficult, and Almari really struggled with not knowing what Nadine was up to day by day.
The distance would have become much more of a problem for him than it was for her, because he would feel, although he could watch and he could see and he could take her time, he wouldn't actually be able to control anything she was doing.
He was somebody who was prone to being very controlling, somebody who was possibly used to getting their own way in every avenue. To have a relationship which was over this kind of distance, where he couldn't be sure what she was doing from minute to minute, would be very disturbing for him. And every little bit of darkness in the areas of what she was doing, Almari would have filled with paranoid ideas.
Over the months that followed, rather than become more secure about their relationship, Almari became increasingly demanding of Nadine. He even created fictitious personal tragedies to try to gain her sympathy.
My mother's sick and dying in hospital, my sister's died, so much tragedy to keep her focused on him. Even if she was with the family, well, you'd better leave them and I need you now. It was so intense, constantly.
It may have been intense, but it was working. Each online message was a calculated step by Almari to groom Nadine, and she was falling for him more and more as the months went by.
Throughout 2014, Nadine and Al-Mahri remained in contact, and during that summer, she flew over to stay with him in a trip all paid for by her newfound friend.
Nadine was over the moon at the prospect of a dream holiday to the Big Apple with her perfect man.
She was really happy to finally get out of Cardiff and explore the world and, you know, have sort of artistic explorations. He even said, well, you know, when you come here, we're going to look at houses. And myself and Nadine, we would look at houses and we would build their future together.
Since they first met, Al-Mahri had proudly shown off his home and lifestyle online. And now Nadine was finally going to see it firsthand. But her dream trip turned into a total nightmare.
She came back from New York with a bruised eye and bruised lip. That was also swollen. She lost a lot of weight in New York. She was only there a short time. She frankly said, I don't really want to talk about it.
I know something's going on and you're not letting us in. You're hiding something. I know it's painful, but whatever it is, we've been through too much together as a family for you to hide anything like this. She said, it's worse than you can ever imagine. I went, how, what? And then she described her situation when she went to New York and where she'd found herself basically holed up in a cellar which she'd been imprisoned.
According to Nadine, when she arrived in New York, Al-Mahri drove her from the airport to a house that bore no resemblance to the images he'd shown her online. Nadine was then held captive in a basement.
It was her prison and she knew that moment that everything had been a lie. And I think even when she witnessed what was happening, even in the car right there, she was telling herself, no, this can't be real. This, you know, I've spoken to him so many times, you know, this is not real. He showed me his house on Skype. She saw so much evidence to believe that he did have this sort of dream life that she could be a part of.
Shockingly, being imprisoned was not the worst thing Nadine had to endure.
She said he had tried to rape me, if not succeeded. I don't think she wanted to admit that to me. She only said he tried.
When she met him in New York, I think she got the full force of actually who he really was, and that must have been the most awful shock. She must have been absolutely terrified.
When she got back home, Nadine called Cardiff Bay Police Station on September 15th, 2014. She told them that whilst in New York, she'd been raped by Al-Mahri and he attempted to strangle her. But tragically, she never followed up the complaint.
Nadine probably dropped the rape claim due to the fact that she would have difficulty in proving the case.
She probably thought, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. No one's going to believe me. I'm never going to beat this with the system. So I'm just going to try and manage it myself.
Nadine's dream turned into a nightmare. Safely back in Cardiff, though, she believed she was now beyond Al-Mahri's reach. She could draw a line under the relationship and move on with her life. But almost immediately, Al-Mahri began to bombard her with abusive messages, telling her, you will be in hell. He also left a very sinister voice message saying, I've been calling you a lot. I will never ever stop now or give up. I will harm you, he said.
This man is a dangerous man. There is just no doubt about that at all. And what's going on in his mind at the moment is probably, how dare you? How dare you not do what I say? And he responds to that with all sorts of things. He is showing that he's not going to give up and he is going to maintain this control by force.
Nadine was adamant their relationship was over, but Al-Mahri refused to accept they were finished. And then odd things started to happen.
There were strange situations where Nadine said to me, Mum, he seems to know where I am, that I'm not in the house or I'm not home. Oh, that's really freaky because he knows you're standing there and he knows that we've been talking and he knows that I've texted you to meet me and she said, it's kind of, I'm intrigued by it, but I'm scared.
Disturbingly, without Nadine's knowledge, Almari had illegally installed spyware on her electronic devices. From 3,000 miles away, he was monitoring Nadine's every move.
There's spyware that you can buy and put on a computer. And that's quite easy. You just email somebody an infected file. When they open that file, it installs the spyware on the computer. The victim doesn't know. Mobile spyware is more difficult because you really need possession of the phone. If that person has had access to your phone, it actually only takes about 5 minutes to install the spyware. It allows them to access the microphones, the cameras, the messaging, everything that you can do on the phone, they can do as well. It's, an attractive proposition to a stalker.
Stalkers are fixated on a person. He was definitely fixated on Nadine. But they also have this obsessive need to know exactly what that person is doing and when and how and who they're with. And 21st century, we've got electronic devices that can achieve that very easily for people who know what they're doing.
Almari had invaded every part of Nadine's private life. Whenever he wanted to, he could switch on her camera phone and see everything she was doing. He could also turn on the phone's microphone, listen to her phone calls, and follow her movements. And with all this information, Almari was bombarding her with threats.
He sent her very unpleasant texts, threatening her and threatening to injure her and using abusive and foul language towards her. And there were hundreds of these texts.
And Almari's unrelenting harassment was taking its toll on Nadine.
You could see she had bags under her eyes. She wasn't getting up in the mornings. She wasn't focused. She's starting to lose her happiness. You wasn't seeing her smile as much, a beautiful smile, And it was at that point, I started to get a bit firm with her, and I said to her, listen, if we don't see you start changing your routine, then I'm gonna have to literally break your mobile phone.
Well, this is all part and parcel of the whole process that this individual as a predator is in, because a predator has to stalk, but it comes into play as part of the predatorial behaviour that he's going to show.
There's no doubt in my mind that the obsessive, possessive, manipulative Almari was a cyberstalker of the most extreme kind. These are the actions of a very disturbed individual, capable of the most callous and brutal crimes.
If things weren't terrifying enough for Nadine, Almari then resorted to blackmail.
Mum, she said he's got pictures of me, very compromised pictures of me in various forms of undress, and he's blackmailing me. And I'm going to have to leave Cardiff, and I'm going to have to leave my life.
In the course of their relationship, he had obtained photographs of her, which I wouldn't want anyone to believe were in any way unpleasant, but were not necessarily the sort of photographs that you would want to share outside your relationship. It's understandable that Nadine would not want them either shown to other friends or family, or, as he was threatening to do, simply exhibit them on the internet.
Now, in the case of a good Muslim girl, this is particularly pernicious. This is something that could destroy and dishonour her for a lifetime. And this would have been a really serious threat to Nadine.
Nadine tried to hide the blackmail from her family, but her brother Eamon discovered her secrets.
Just flicking through her phone, not on anything personal, but just, you know how brothers get, they get a bit nosy, don't they? And this message just popped up on the screen. And then literally Then it was just bombarded with messages talking about if you stop talking to me, or if you think you're going to leave me here now, you know, I'll put these photos all over the internet, you know, I'll show your family these photos. And it was at that point when I read that message that I knew there was a lot more to what's going on here. And so obviously I was anticipating to see whether he'd come back to the UK or not at that point.
For Nadine, the continual harassment followed by the blackmail must have felt like an impossible and frightening situation.
Ultimately, it's about getting her back to make sure she stays with him. At the moment, it's about staying with him electronically because he's in New York. But of course, the whole process here is about meeting up again.
Nadine was a lonely woman looking for love, but loneliness can lead to mistakes. And I can't help wondering if online dating, as opposed to the more traditional methods, is more likely not only to lead you to the wrong person, but also into danger.
I'm meeting criminologist Dr. Elizabeth Yardley and clinical forensic psychologist Mike Berry to find out how online dating can be exploited by predators like Almari.
Is there the sense that vulnerable people, when they go online looking for love, they are particularly vulnerable to finding the wrong lover at the wrong time?
I think it's a possibility because there are people on these dating sites who are quite predatory and they will pick up on people's vulnerabilities and those types of things.
I mean, are we led to believe that just that online conversations really can disguise the genuine character and motivation of the people communicating?
Oh, without any doubt. You're selling. The whole courtship is about selling yourself to a potential buyer. And what you do on the internet is you lie. You bring up the good things and you forget to tell them the bad things.
For a predator, the online world is a paradise for victims.
It really is quite a hunting ground for people who are setting out with an intention to harm others.
I've come to Cardiff, where in 2012, Nadina Burris thought she'd met the man of her dreams, Sami Almari, on the internet dating site Muslim Match. But Almari wasn't the man he claimed to be. In the 2 years that followed, Almari had allegedly raped, imprisoned, stalked and blackmailed Nadine. And when he realised he couldn't control her, he then murdered her.
In late 2014, Nadine was still being stalked by Almari online and in the phone. But by November, it looked like her love life would take a turn for the better when she met a 36-year-old interior design student called Daniel. A few weeks later, the pair went for a cup of coffee. Daniel was clearly interested in Nadine, and she was flattered by the attention.
She said, I seem to like him. And I said, oh, that's absolutely wonderful, lovely. You know, she said, well, he's actually got my number. And I went, really? Okay. And I was happy. I thought, great. You know, this is something that she needed now.
Nadine thought her relationship with Almari was over and began communicating with Daniel. But what she didn't know was that Almari was monitoring her every move, using spyware he'd illegally installed on her phone.
When she met another man, it doesn't really matter what stage the relationship was at. That would have been a massive trigger for him to up his behaviour. Almari would have seen that as absolutely intolerable.
Furious that Nadine had found someone else, he escalated his abuse and name-calling online, demanding she didn't meet Daniel. Desperate to stop the intrusion into her life, Nadine then tried to block Almari from contacting her through Viber and WhatsApp messaging. But he continued stalking her. Almari was determined to control Nadine come what may. The spyware, blackmail and abuse weren't working, so Almari decided to fly to the UK and confront her in person.
On the morning of the 27th of December, he arrived at Heathrow on a flight from New York. Surprisingly, Nadine agreed to meet him face-to-face at the airport.
At that point, Nadine was almost encouraging it because she wanted closure. So I think that was what she thought. She thought it'd be on her terms, her country, her city, and he couldn't hurt her. She was invincible here, and she wasn't.
Nadine would have felt obligated to meet Almari. One, she wanted to make sure that Almari was not going to dishonour her in terms of sending photos to her parents. And two, he would be very persuasive and demanding. And Nadine would not be the first female, particularly, who actually gave way to the demands of a stalking, jealous, controlling individual.
She probably still felt she could manage the situation by being reasonable because she was a reasonable person. It's him that's not.
We don't have a complete picture of what happened after Almari arrived in the UK on December 27th, 2014. But thanks to her family and CCTV, there are glimpses into Nadine's final 4 days.
The day after Almari arrived in the UK, Nadine cancelled her cinema date with Daniel, saying, "Sorry, but feeling unwell after the trip to London. I won't be able to make it today," she said. She then followed up with another message. "To be honest, a crazy situation has presented itself. It's kind of complicated. An ex has turned up on the scene."
2 days later, at 5:09 p.m, there is CCTV footage of Almari leaving Nadine's apartment and then returning a few minutes later.
About an hour and a half after that, Nadine's brother Eamon arrives at the apartment to collect some post.
As I approached her house, I rang the bell and there was some shuffling going on inside. So I opened up the letterbox and I could see, a pair of man's legs. They definitely weren't women's, So I called out through the letterbox, saying, "I can see you, open the door, who's that?" And the legs just kind of scuttered off somewhere down the hallway. A few minutes later, he just said, "Oh, is that you, Eamon?" And he opened the door. So I was alarmed by this, to see him in my sister's flat, my sister absent, I don't know how he got in here. And then we kind of got into a bit of an altercation.
Shortly after the argument with Eamon, Nadine arrives at the flat with her older brother, Jamal. Protected by her brothers, she told Almari she wanted nothing more to do with him. And then Jamal drove him to Cardiff Central Railway Station. Here, he warned Almari to stay away from his sister for good. But Almari had no intention of giving up. He had more sinister plans in mind.
At 7:54 p.m, Almari is spotted on CCTV at a local store buying a bottle of gin. About a half an hour afterwards, at 8:23 p.m, he checks into the Futures Inn Hotel in Cardiff Bay. Shortly after booking in, he goes to the bar and starts drinking tequila.
Almari had been violently rebuffed by Nadine's brothers and told where to go, which will not have gone down well with a controlling individual. This is someone who really wants to assert himself over this situation rather than being sent running by relatives. This was a very dangerous bomb waiting to explode.
Almari asked the hotel reception to call a mobile number. It was Nadine's. He told her he'd left his passport and phone at her flat and she needed to bring them to the hotel so he could leave the country. She agreed to meet him, a decision that would prove fatal.
This was a kind of, you must come back, you must come to me. This element of control was reaching out again, and Nadine really couldn't argue with that, as Almari wouldn't be able to leave the country.
She came to the hotel just after 9 o'clock and went to Almari's room, number 203. He then went out to a nearby restaurant where witnesses reported that things were clearly not that good between the pair. They then returned here around 11 o'clock, and for reasons which we simply can't fathom, she accompanied him to his room. She was never seen alive again.
Two years after they met online, and after a campaign of stalking, intimidation and blackmail, Al-Mari finally killed Nadine. He then left her lifeless body in room 203. Downstairs, Al-Mari asked the bar manager where he could withdraw £10,000. Al-Mari was then caught on CCTV casually walking into a casino. He had to register as a member. And then he went to the bar where he had 3 shots of tequila as Nadine's body lay in his hotel room. Al-Mari seemingly didn't care whether he left a trail or not. Shortly after 3 a.m, Al-Mari left his hotel room for the last time, placing a Do Not Disturb sign on the handle. He asked directions for the M4, telling the night porter his sister was still sleeping. The final time we see Al-Mari is him arriving at Heathrow Airport, driving Nadine's car at 7:05 a.m. Why did Nadine agree to meet Al-Mari in private? I want to find out what Dr. Elizabeth Yardley and Mike Berry's thoughts are on this.
Why did she go back to the hotel room, Mike?
She thinks if she goes back to him, he is going to give her that information, all the pictures, everything she wanted.
Liz, do you think he thought out how he was going to murder her?
I think he probably had thought about it, and that's another thing that we need to be aware of here. Murders like this do not happen out of the blue. The perpetrator does not snap. They don't turn from a normal person one day into a murderer the next. This is somebody who had a gradual escalation of controlling and possessive and jealous behaviour. This was always a possibility.
And what he does is interesting, he actually kills her in a very personalised way. Strangling somebody is you have control in your hands. You are slowly throttling that person. It's a very personal, very aggressive, very violent way to take somebody's life.
It's an inevitable consequence of his controlling behaviour. Ultimately, he would meet some resistance and eventually he'd have to enforce his control. So if it wasn't Nadine, it would be somebody else, Mike.
Yeah, but he wouldn't necessarily kill them. Most cyber stalkers don't kill. Most stalkers don't kill. He had a very high risk of violence, which may have resulted in permanent damage to somebody or death.
I'm in Cardiff investigating the tragic murder of 28-year-old Nadine Bouris by American Sami Al-Mari on New Year's Eve 2014. The pair had met online via an internet dating site. The morning after he murdered Nadine, he drove to Heathrow Airport and boarded a flight to Qatar in the Middle East. He was trying to flee justice. Meanwhile, back in Cardiff, Nadine's body lay undiscovered in his hotel room, and Nadine's family had no idea where she was.
We were texting her, do you want to meet us uptown? What's happened? Where are you going? Where have you been? What are you doing, you know? And no response from Nadine was very unusual. And I was worried and scared.
Then, while Nadine's loved ones were frantically trying to contact her, Nadine's body was found.
The duty manager went into the room and discovered Nadine's body. The room, I understand, was dishevelled. There were towels all over the floor. The drawers had been moved. There was bottles everywhere, and it looked like some towels had also been stained. And from what we heard in court, Nadine's body had also been washed, and she had been left underneath the bed covers, so you could just see her face at the top.
Soon after Nadine's body was discovered, the authorities gave her family the bad news.
Our brother Jalal came in the door, and he had 2 women with him, and I just knew that something had happened. I just knew. And they told her and told us that she was gone, and the first thing that we said was, he did it. I couldn't wish that moment on my worst enemy. Sorry.
Al-Mari had the money to try to escape justice.
Soon after he arrived in Qatar, Al-Mari boarded another flight, this time to Tanzania. He was determined to get away with Nadine's murder, no matter how much it cost. Bizarrely, during his time on the run, he was in regular phone contact with the police in the UK. He told them he was in Thailand.
This man is not somebody who is thinking straight. He probably thought that just a little bit of distance would be enough.
Sami Al-Mari clearly wanted people to know that Nadine was dead, because he rang the hotel several times saying, have you found the body yet? He also spoke to the police in the hotel and gave them details about what room she was in and the fact that she had died. But he also said that she had asked him to help her commit suicide. He said that she wanted to die and he was assisting her, and he'd fabricated this with a suicide note that he'd left on the side. Some of the words incomprehensible, but it was signed from Nadine, allegedly.
An international arrest warrant was applied for, and it took some time. He was eventually tracked. I think the correct expression would be in the bush. He was many miles from any known area, but in an area, I believe, in which he had relatives.
After more than 2 weeks on the run, Al-Mari was arrested and flown back to the UK to face justice. It was only during the post-mortem that the true horror of what happened to Nadine was revealed.
The coroner's report found that Nadine's body was covered in 17 bruises, marks and abrasions, including a bite to her forearm.
This was somebody completely out of control. Going back to what we know about him, he's got a chaotic life. And now he's committed murder in a very chaotic fashion. That he could have just strangled her, but he didn't. There were the bite marks, there were scratches, and without a doubt she fought back. But he just wanted to physically hurt her so people could see her like that. He had no feelings for her, no empathy for her, which shows that area of being a sociopathic predator.
Sami Al-Mari was tried at Cardiff Crown Court in November 2016. Initially, he only admitted to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. But on the second day of his trial, he suddenly changed his plea to murder.
Al-Mari claimed he was suffering from an abnormality of mental function and said that he heard the voice of God telling him to kill Nadine Bouris. The judge gave him a life sentence for murder.
Clearly, he decided he no longer wished to put forward what we had always said was a false defence.
Al-Mari was a dangerous and obsessive man who used social media to conduct a 2-year relationship with Nadine before brutally murdering her. Without social media, would Nadine still be alive today? I want to hear what Dr. Elizabeth Yardley and clinical forensic psychologist Mike Berry think.
Liz, what kind of murderer was Al-Mari?
Well, Al-Mari was a predator because social media allowed him access to his victim. Social media was all the way through this dynamic between these two people. So he used it to monitor and control his victim as well. So it wasn't just used to find her, but it was an integral part all the way through of this relationship, and it was a really important tool in his toolbox of control.
Mike, what are the red flags that you would suggest that people look out for online?
If they've made claims of being world champion boxer, world champion this and this, check it out. Use the internet to find out about them. Also, if they're on Facebook, look at their Facebook connections, things like that. Do a bit of homework before you fall in love with a guy.
Liz, what needs to be done? What could be done online to protect someone like Nadine?
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to raise awareness of this kind of behaviour, because it's something that is getting all too common now. We see abusers using social media, using technology as a way of meeting victims and as a way of controlling them once they've got them under their spell.
Without social media, there can be little doubt that Nadine would still be alive today.
Our life now will never be the same. We have to take comfort in each other, but that's a very difficult thing to do. We're scattered, we're still grieving, we're still sad, and we're still blaming each other internally about what we could have done. How could this ever be stopped? And I hope that there will be some warnings to others that it won't always end up as happily married forever.